All right. Let's roll. I'm going to do the clap thing, get the audio synchronized here. Okay, well, let's get started. So, my name is Roger Martin. I'm here with my parents, Ron Martin and Marty Martin. This is February 2023. And we're just going to talk about some of the memories you guys have from the old days. So we have a list of questions that you guys have been thinking about for the last few weeks, and let's get right into it. So the first question is, when and where were you born? Who would like to go first?
You would.
Okay. Well, I was born January 30th, 1949 in a hospital in Milwaukee County. And I was on a 120-acre dairy farm that was in the family for over 100 years. So they had a big barn. On one side was the cattle barn for the cows, the milk cows, 16 milk cows. And the other side of the barn was the horse barn. And then they had a granary. The lower part of the granary, they had 300 chickens. The upper part of the granary, of course, was stored for wheat and oats. And they also raised pigs and sheep and had one team of horses. Grandpa and my dad would always argue about the horses. And my dad wanted to get rid of the horses, and Grandpa said, those tractors will never last because they don't put manure on the land. And Dad would say, yeah, but the tractors don't eat hay all winter. We could put in some cows instead of the horses, and we'd get more milk out of the cows and make a better living.
So when you were really young, was your grandfather still involved in the farming? And how did they do that, like business-wise? Who was running the farm?
By the time I was born, my grandfather was retired.
Okay.
He and Grandma lived upstairs in the same house where we lived, and but he would come out and putz around on a Sunday afternoon. You could usually find him out in the machine shop, straightening rusty nails.
Okay.
Or he'd be winding a ball of twine. He had all kinds of twine balls all over in the shed, stacked up in the corners. I don't think he ever used it for anything except for shocking corn. That's the only time I remember using a ball of twine.
And how long did they live in the farmhouse? Well, I guess the farmhouse was sold in 1959.
Yeah.
And then did they continue to live with your parents?
No. Then they lived with Uncle Art and Aunt Dorothy. Grandpa and Grandma moved in with them because Uncle Art sold the house at that time, and they sold a farm at that time, and then they bought a big house in Big Bend.
Okay.
So they lived there until they had to go to a retirement home. Actually, Grandma died first of a stroke.
Okay. Okay. Mom, you want to talk about when and where you were born?
Sure. I was born on May 12th, 1952 at Deaconess Hospital in Milwaukee County. My parents, George and Alberta Bozine White, were married in 1935, and they lived on Warren Avenue in Milwaukee. It was known as the Italian District at that time. And the house that they lived in was an all-brick, 4-family tenement. And there was one family that had a telephone, and they would help the rest of the people with messages and let people know if someone was on the phone for them. And that's where my mom and dad actually met Roy and Olive Husk, who became lifelong friends. And Roy and Olive eventually moved out to Brush, Colorado, where Ron and I visited with you and John when you were younger. And so I have 3 older brothers, James, who is still living, My brother Bud recently passed away in 2022, and my brother Tom passed away in 2007. And so
I want to hear a little bit more about this phone in the tenement. So where was the phone located? In a common location?
No, it was lived in someone's apartment.
And it's only one apartment had the phone.
Correct.
So that person had to answer the calls for everybody?
Just about, yeah.
And then if it was for like your family?
They would come and get either my mom or dad and let them know. Oh, and the other thing I just remembered is my Aunt Eileen lived with my mom and dad in that house.
Okay.
And because my mother's mother, Selma, ended up going to a mental institution. She had a nervous breakdown, and she lived there basically her whole life.
Okay.
They didn't have a ways to deal with her.
And this tenement building on Warren Avenue, that's not the schoolhouse in Franklin. What can you talk about when you moved to Franklin?
Well, I was born in 1952, and I was told they moved into the house in Franklin sometime in 1953. That's pretty much all I remember about that.
Your memories are pretty much of the schoolhouse.
Of the schoolhouse, yeah.
Yeah. When they bought the schoolhouse, had other families already been living in it?
No, it was a schoolhouse, and it was a one-room schoolhouse. There was two entrances, one for the girls and one for the boys. And each entrance had a cloakroom. And in the cloakroom, the girls had their coats and lunches, and the boys had the other side. So there was two sets of steps going into the schoolhouse.
Okay. So it had been a recently closed school, and then your parents
probably. And
bought it.
I remember hearing that my dad bought the place from a Mr. Foote, Foote, for $4,000.
Oh, okay.
And he eventually, with the help of friends from the Italian district, Betty and I can't remember his name, Felix Mercado. Felix was an electrician, and so he helped my dad turn that one-room schoolhouse into 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen, and a bathroom that only had a toilet in it. So after using the toilet, you went to the kitchen to wash your hands, or you washed up to take a bath.
Okay. No second floor.
No second floor. Well, there was an attic, but it wasn't used because it only had an up and down staircase to get there that you had to pull down.
Okay.
But you said your mother hung clothes in the attic to dry in the winter.
Into winter time, she would carry a basket of clothes upstairs to hang it.
Okay. Okay.
So I guess it probably freeze dried.
And there's John D. making presents now. So, Dad, how was let's talk about, so the 1959, the farmhouse in Milwaukee was sold. That land ended up becoming the land built out into houses in a subdivision. Right. And your parents bought a different farm, a pre-existing farm in Hebron, and basically set up shop there and continued farming there for a number of years. And that's where, let's see, if that was 59, you were about 10 when that happened. Yeah. Okay. Why don't you talk about your memories of that Hebron farm, from age 10 to, through your young...
Yeah, okay. But before we go there, a little bit more I wanted to say about the farm in Franklin. My folks had an egg route. I think it was like every Friday, they would gather up all the eggs that they had gathered from the chickens, and they'd butcher chickens and ducks in the fall, and in the summertime vegetables from the garden, and they would go into Milwaukee, and they had a route where they'd sell all this stuff. They had a pre-established route for certain houses, taverns, grocery stores, and they'd sell all this produce from the farm, and then they had money to go to the grocery store and they'd buy staples like coffee, sugar, flour, spices, things that they didn't raise. Otherwise, everything else was raised on the farm. All our food came from the garden or the barn. In the fall, my uncle would come out, and my dad, my uncle, and my grandpa, they'd all get together, and Eddie Dietz, one neighbor, and they'd butcher hogs. And my dad said that was always the favorite time of the year for him, because then he'd have fresh food, fresh meat. Because they didn't really, when he was a kid, they still didn't have refrigeration. And my mother, I remember her coming out from the house with a dishpan to catch blood. They'd stick the pig with a knife, and the blood would gush out, and my mom would hold a pan under there to catch as much blood as she could. And she'd take it back to the house, and she was always stirring it. And she had to stir it until it got cool, and then it went coagulate. And they would use that blood to make blood sausage. They'd cook the heads of the pigs down and scrape all the meat off, and they'd mix that with raisins and prunes and other things. I can't remember. I wish I had the recipe. But we always enjoyed blood sausage, and my folks would also make grits. It's not like the southern grits made from corn. It was grits that was made with barley and also trimmings from the hog head. And all of us kids just loved blood sausage and grits, except, well, one day Ellen kind of got turned off. That's my sister. She found a pig's tooth in the grits. I remember her getting up and leaving the table.
I think I would too.
You know, just yesterday I was watching the video I took of you talking to your dad in 1999, and that story actually came up of the pig's tooth.
Oh.
And just a little, your dad actually did a little fact check on that, and he said that that's what you guys always thought it was, but he didn't think it actually was a pig's tooth.
Oh.
So I don't know if it was or not, but I put that in there, that's what your dad had said in that video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he said it was like a piece of gristle or something,
Yeah.
but it's something not edible.
So when we moved to the farm out in Hebron, that was a really big turning point in my life, because I was 10 years old, and now I was old enough to really go out and explore, and we made that move Christmas Eve, and we went to church service, Mom and the kids. We went to the Christmas Eve church service, and then we all got in the car and we drove that hour drive out to Fort Atkinson. And that previous day, my dad had arranged for all his friends and neighbors to come to the old farm with their big old cattle trucks. They loaded up all the cattle, the sheep, the pigs. By that time, the horses were gone. Barney and Daisy were gone. But feed and machinery and milking equipment, everything had to be moved on one day to make that switch. And so that was a really big deal. And I remember all that winter, my dad going back to the old farm a couple times a week with the big truck, hauling more hay or corn or oats and other items that he needed. It took him like a whole year to actually move everything.
Yeah. What were some of your responsibilities on the farm as a kid?
Well, I had chores to do. So when I'd get home from school, I had a routine of I'd have to feed the chickens, gather eggs from the chickens, and in the wintertime, my dad would always put 3 or 4 heifers in the chicken coop to keep the chickens warm. So I'd have to feed the heifers and bed them down, water them. Then I'd go to the milk house. I'd put all the milk utensils together so they were ready for Mom and Dad to start milking after supper. And so then we'd all eat supper about 5:30. By 6:30, we were all going back out to the barn to milk cows. And then I'd have calves to feed, and I'd have to go up in the haymouth, throw down like 8 bales of hay on each side for the cows and chutes. I'd go up in the haymouth, and they'd drop the hay straight down, bales of hay. And you had to be careful, because if somebody was walking through there, they'd get hit with the hay. It could kill them. So we always had to tell everybody, Ron's going up there to throw hay down, don't go in front of the cows. So But during like in the spring when I come home from school, there was usually a note on the kitchen table saying, Ron, take the case tractor and the disc and go down to the 10-acre field by Jim Falker and disc that field and get it ready for planting.
Mm-hmm. Were your parents interested in like reading the latest technology advancements in farming? You know, there new things are coming along all the time, and I'm sure there were farming journals to read that would talk about some of those things. Were your parents interested in that type of stuff?
Yeah, my parents subscribed to the Farm Journal and several, there was like 3 or 4, Hordes Dairyman was one, different journals that were educational for farm things. And my dad did pick up on some of those things. Well, he got rid of the horses and got more tractors, but he'd cut off that long pole off of the equipment that was rigged up for horse-drawn equipment. Had that long pole. We'd cut that off, and they'd put metal straps on it and make a hitch for tractors. So he could use all that horse-drawn equipment with the tractors then. Mm-hmm. And I know he adopted some disinfectants for the chickens. Every spring they'd get about 150 baby chicks in the brooder house, and every spring they would disinfect the entire brooder house. And we had to be careful. We couldn't be running in there as kids playing or anything after it was disinfected because we had to keep the disease out. So he was up on that. But then the foxes would come and they'd kill a bunch of chickens, and my mom and dad would really be upset about that. Or the neighbor's dog would come and kill chickens.
Mm-hmm. Were there, did you use a gun to kind of keep the fox population under control?
Well, my dad had that .22, but the only thing he shot was rabbits that were sleeping on the manure pile. see, we had the horse barn and the cow barn. And in the wintertime, when the snow got too deep and you couldn't haul manure every day, you just had a pile of manure outside the barn. And the horse manure got really hot, and the rabbits would always sleep there.
Marinade.
And anyway, yeah, you'd see the steam rising from that manure pile, and the rabbits would go up there and sleep. And when my dad saw rabbits there, he'd get the gun, and he'd say, Ronnie, we're going to go shoot a rabbit. He's going to watch it. So I'd go behind him, and he'd go up there, and he'd pop the rabbit, and the rabbit would jump up and fall down dead.
Did you end up eating the rabbit? Or?
Oh, yeah, we ate rabbits. The same thing happened when he was out in the hayfield cutting hay, and he'd cut into a pheasant nest. He'd bring it home, and he'd hand it to Ma, and Ma would fix it for supper. And funny thing is, when her and I got married, we were on the farm. I cut into a pheasant nest, and I come home with the pheasant. I said, Marty, here's a pheasant.
He said, what do you want me to do with that?
I said, well, my mother always cooked it for supper.
And I said, take it to your mother.
Yeah.
Okay. Mom, let's get back to your house. Let's talk about heat. What kind of heat was in your house? Did you have a TV? You had mentioned you didn't have a shower. You must have gotten a shower at some point.
When I turned 18 and my dad they were getting ready for our wedding, and they were going to have people staying over. Mm-hmm. So my dad did get the shower in finally. But I want to back up. My dad, when he was ripping out the walls of the schoolhouse, found paperwork of his Grandma Schwartz in the walls. How they got there, I don't know if anybody knows.
What kind of paperwork?
Her report cards or some kind of school papers. So my dad turned them over to the Historical Society in Franklin.
Was there any relation between your family and the Grandma Schwartz?
No, but it was his Grandma Schwartz.
My Grandma Schwartz went to that school when she was a kid.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
And in the back of the schoolhouse was a 2-seater outdoor toilet. One side for the boys, one side for the girls.
Was there a wall between there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, naturally. And eventually we took that toilet, and for prom, homecoming, it got burned up. That was the tradition back then.
Well, you donated to the bonfire.
Yeah,
for
for the bonfire. Well, my dad wanted it gone, and someone with a truck came and got it, and we burned it up.
How about heat in the house?
Oh, well, we had like an oil burning heater that was fairly large that sat in the living room. And I don't know too many details about that because eventually my dad got rid of that and he put in a propane unit in the living room and in the kitchen. So they were like back to back because the wall separated the living room and the kitchen. And so it was propane then. So, and I don't know, he must have had propane delivered to the house. That I don't really remember too much. And, you know, Ron talked about all the chores he had to do. I really didn't have any chores other than helping my dad outside. I had to help with mowing the lawn, an acre and a half with a push mower, and I helped in the garden. Yeah.
In retrospect, do you think it would have been good for you to have had more chores?
Nah. No, I didn't even have to make my own bed like I made our kids do. But having the house picked up was always important to me. Let's see here.
How about a TV in your house?
It was a small black and white TV, no remote control. You had to get up out of your chair to turn the channel. I don't think we had many channels. I think I read in yours you only had 3 channels, so maybe that's, and it would have rabbit ears.
Sure, no cable TV. It
Oh
just
gosh,
would be
no.
whatever the antenna was broadcasting in the Milwaukee area.
Yeah, and sometimes someone had to be playing with the antenna to try to get whatever channel you wanted to watch tuned in. And let's see. Oh, where the TV was located in our house was right near the door from the open way from the living room to the kitchen. So if you happen to be taking your bath at the kitchen sink and somebody wanted to change the channel, they had to holler over to you and say, I need to change the channel. So you grab a towel, cover up, let them change the channel, and then go back to doing whatever you're doing. But when Ron mentioned earlier about his grandma Martin dying, I remember that.
Yeah, she was a special person to you.
Yep.
I think you have said that she was really caring and loving to you and really accepted you, and I can tell that means a lot to you.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, she was a nice grandma to me too. I remember one time for my birthday, she said she forgot to get me a birthday present, but she went to the cupboard and she gave me a brand new box of Wheaties.
And you still eat them to this day.
Yeah, I still eat Wheaties, my favorite. And I ate that box of Wheaties all by myself.
Yeah. We would spend Christmas Eve there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember any special moments in particular you remember where she did something nice for you that still sticks with you today?
Well, between her and Grandpa Martin, they would, not your dad, but your Grandpa Martin,
Yeah.
we had a place that Marilyn and I, and sometimes Luann, would play outside. He'd have like a little...
Oh, the old corn crib.
Yeah.
You used to play house in there.
Yep,
I
we would
remember
play
that.
house in the old corn crib, and Grandma would bring out tea and cookies, I think. But even for Christmas Eve, she remembered my mom and dad. I mean, it was basically my mom. My dad always worked. She remembered us with a box of homemade cookies.
Oh.
A sweet lady.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Grandpa and Grandma must have did pretty good on the farm, because I remember Grandma having a long fur coat, a full-length fur coat. And I asked her one time, I said, what kind of fur is that, Grandma? And she said, that's seal. And they had really nice furniture in the parlor. It was beautiful furniture. it was like, I don't know what style you call it, but with the curved legs and stuff, and all upholstered. And they had one of these, I think it's called a Tiffany lamp with the balls that go like this. And that was setting on like a marble table, a table with fancy legs and with a maple or marble top on it. And it was, it wasn't a real big table, but it was like special.
Well, Marilyn has the furniture. She has that now set up in her house. And I believe Ruth has that Tiffany lamp and marble table.
And they also had a player piano, the kind that you could put in this roll of paper with the slots in it, and you'd pump your feet on some pedals, and it would play all by itself. The keys would all go by itself, and it played really nice tunes. And that must have been a pretty expensive item back in those days.
Yeah.
But it was a good, productive farm.
Yeah. So that has me thinking about things that your families might have done for fun growing up. So I imagine on the farm there's lots of chores to be done. There's always something that you could be doing. So there's always like work to be done. But what did you do, or did your family take time away from work to go have fun? What kinds of fun did you have?
Sunday afternoons. After church, we'd go to church in the morning, come home for dinner, and then after that, we'd go to visit somebody, or we'd go to a picnic. Like my folks belonged to the Farm Bureau, and they always had a picnic in the summer, and there was the Rural Life Association. They had a picnic in the summer. We sent our milk to the Dean Foods Company, and they had a big picnic with lots of prizes and stuff. So we always enjoyed going to that. And me and my sisters belonged to 4-H, so we'd go to the county fair. I'd show rabbits and woodworking stuff and electricity. I took a lot of different projects in 4-H. So our social life consisted of basically church, school, and 4-H, as far as I remember, other than visiting relatives.
Not much travel?
Oh, no, you couldn't go very far because you had to be home every 12 hours to milk the cows.
Oh.
I remember when her and I first got married, and one Sunday we were going someplace, and when we were first married, Marty remarked, she said, oh, let's not stay out too late because I want to get to bed tonight fairly early. And I said, well, we got to be home at 5 o'clock to milk the cows anyway.
It was a hard transition.
Yeah. I know when you were young, your family took some family vacations, because I've heard about you all piling into a Volkswagen Bug.
Well, it was my mom, my dad, and myself, and then Jim and Linda and Ruth and Bud each drove their own car. My dad, when he was working part-time at a gas station, he met a man named Marti. That's the only name I ever remember. But we went up to a cabin that I believe he set my dad up with. I think we had 2 or 3 cabins up there because we all wouldn't have fit in the one cabin. And we'd be up there for a week. My dad would have to plan his vacations, probably early in the year. And the only funny thing I remember about that is my mother used to get some really severe migraine headaches. And he'd try to pick a week to go up to the cabin, and my mom would say, well, I don't know if I'm going to have a headache that week. I don't know, that always stuck with me. But we always ended up going, and it would take us forever to drive up there because there was no interstate. And I remember with that little Volkswagen, we started out on the interstate from Franklin, and then we would head west going towards Madison, and evidently there was a long hill, and my dad would have to get that little Bug really flying to make it up the hill.
Oh.
But yeah, we had a lot of fun staying at the cabins, and then eventually, let's see, when I was in high school, Mom and Dad, I had a job then, and Mom and Dad drove to the state of Washington to visit relatives that lived there. And Dad really wanted me to go along to help drive, but I think my mom did some of the driving too, but he pretty much was the sole driver.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, I didn't get to go to 4-H or anything like that. We only had one car, and my dad needed it.
I'm gonna pause for just a second and make sure all these cameras are still rolling. Make sure they didn't like shut off or something. So just sit tight.
Okay.
Have a drink.
And good, that one's still rolling. I don't know if you can peek behind that one, Dad, and see if it's still going.
Yeah, I'm sure I can.
And then how was grits made?
And that was a certain kind of barley you bought. And then you grind that up, and then, well, what you call the waste from the meat, you took that. There was little pieces like
Did you
that.
cook the head and all that stuff, and then trim that off the bones and
Yeah.
mix that in to make grits with the barley?
Yeah, and the ears you cut up and grind them up and make that for sausage, like head cheese.
I remember when we were kids and we were eating grits one morning, and we all loved it, and then Ellen bit into something hard and she spit it out on her plate, and it was a pig's tooth.
No, that's what you thought it was, but no. No, there was no big spoon in there. And maybe it was a little harder piece of meat, you know. But no, there was no teeth. They stayed in.
The teeth stayed in the head?
Mm-hmm. When you cooked them, yeah, they stayed in there. Yeah.
Okay, and we're rolling. So I'm gonna sit here and I'm just gonna talk for a minute and make sure my sound is coming through okay. You guys say something.
So when I am a landscaper and I have to plant lawn, do I put it grass side up or grass side down?
Just keep saying to yourself, green side up.